Welcome to the Understanding Society podcast for February 8th. I'm Dan Little. Today's podcast is an interview I conducted with Professor V.K. Ramachandran of the Indian Statistical Institute in Kolkata, India. The ISI is one of India's premier research institutes for development issues and was recognized as an institution of national importance by an act of the Indian Parliament in 1959. Professor Ramachandran is an internationally recognized expert on the state of India's agrarian economy. He has earned a law degree as well as a PhD in economics from the University of Madras. Ramachandran is the author of Wage Labor and Unfreedom in Agriculture, an Indian Case Study, and the editor with Madhura Swaminathan of Agrarian Studies, Essays on Agrarian Relations in Less Developed Countries, and several other related volumes on agrarian change. He is an engaged activist scholar, and it is a pleasure to welcome him today. So if you could just kind of describe a little bit your intellectual itinerary.
My higher education has been entirely in India and in the city of, it's now called Chennai. It was called Madras then. I've studied economics, undergrad and graduate studies. I did a degree in law, and then I did my PhD in agricultural economics at the University of Madras. It was when I came to Harvard, I was a visiting fellow at the Center for Population and Development Studies.
Right, which I remember very well.
That's my. But I've been. I think for me the most important part of my the intellectual background is the fact that I've worked with the Communist Party in India for many years, from my student days, and I think that has really influenced my understanding of social science in a very fundamental way.
You also are, I think in the United States we would call you an activist scholar. Is that a fair description?
I'd like to be.
And so making that connection from your academic scholarship to real social change in India is also of great interest.
I certainly work with the organized left. And I am a member of the state planning boards of two states, West Bengal and Tripura, both of which have left-front governments. Mm-hmm. So apart from for the formal academic work, I also work as the person who handles agriculture in these two planning boards. I would like to talk about observations on social change in India, overall, because when I don't travel too much, but the little I traveled last year, I saw an impression of India in Japan and in the United States, which is completely, I think, out of tune with what we see after 60 years of independence. I mean, the idea that India's shopping malls in great progress and on the way to wealth and equity and trickle down. I think that's a completely false. It's a grotesque distortion of India's reality today. Mm-hmm. And I think that much of this is related. Much of the problem is related to the failure to solve, to resolve the agrarian question, and I think that lies at the heart of the absence of progress in India, the failure to, and what constitutes solving the agrarian question. This is by way of background. We are in the last, over the last few years, let's put it this way. On the one hand, at the core of this problem of poverty, inequality, and deprivation in India is the failure to resolve the agrarian question. At the same time, it is clear from what's happening in the world as a whole that the transformation of rural societies in the less developed world, the third world, particularly since what is called the period of globalization, I think it's probably the most sort of significant process of social change or actually social turmoil in the world today. And we have been very concerned at the new forms of inequality, the new forms of the new forms of the agrarian question itself, the relations of production, the development of the force of production have taken in the countryside. And in the last, particularly since 1991, I think, which is the period of the accelerated introduction of policies of globalization and liberalization in India.
Mm-hmm.
We've been very concerned about this, and so have activists of the mass organizations of the peasantry and agricultural workers in India. Another feature of the situation is, of course, that while there's great poverty and inequality, the conditions, there's still a great deal to do politically to change the situation. So, we have, I think that a feature of the 90s, 2000s is that scholarship has sort of lagged behind the complex changes that have taken place in the countryside. Mm-hmm. And but they shouldn't be allowed to lag like that, right? I mean, because because if we want to change the countryside, we have to try and understand it. The perception of India that is sought to be peddled by the major media organizations is certainly a wrong one. As you know, India gained independence about 60 years ago, wherein we completed 60 years last August 15th. Look back and think about it. When India gained independence 60 years ago, what could the major economic problems of our newly independent nation be said to be? They could be characterized, I think, as follows: that hundreds of millions of India's people lived in the depths of income poverty. They lived in conditions of illiteracy and lack of schooling, in conditions of avoidable disease, and subject to what were certainly among the worst forms of class, caste, and gender oppression in the world. Now, the truly appalling feature of 60 years of independent development is that characterization of India's economic problems remains true even today. I think the basic reason is that 60 years of very painful experience have shown us that no fundamental transformation of the conditions of poverty and oppression in our society can be overcome unless there is a solution of unless the agrarian question is resolved. Well, we have the parties of the left here have tried to identify what the solution to the agrarian question involves. It involves freeing the countryside of landlordism, that is old forms and new, freeing the working peasantry and agricultural workers from their present fetters and guaranteeing the means of income and livelihood, redistributing agricultural land, providing rural working people with house sites and homes, creating employment. Well, that's part of guaranteeing the means of income and livelihood, I guess. Creating the conditions for the liberation of the people of the oppressed castes and tribes and of women, to ensure formal education, and to achieve what I'd like to call the general democratization of life, and to achieve progressive cultural development in rural India. Without that, there is no progress, and we continue to be characterized by basically the same problems as we were 60 years ago.